people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. I'm sure most of you have heard by now, Sebastian Fundora to rematch Tszyu, Xander Zayas, and Jorge Garcia Perez to contest the vacant WBO junior middleweight title.
I wondered how this was all going to break down. It would seem we have our answer.
WBC and WBO junior middleweight champion Sebastian Fundora will not participate in Friday's scheduled purse bid for his mandatory WBO title defense against Xander Zayas. Sources have told Boxing Scene Fundora will instead fight old rival Tszyu at the Las Vegas T-Mobile Arena with just the WBC title up for grabs. July 19th is a possible date for the rematch, but Fundora's promoter, Simpson Lukowicz, told Boxing Scene that nothing has yet been finalized, with 3 dates in July and August under construction.
Under consideration.
There are some questioning the validity of this story. A Twitter account that goes by the name Your Boxing Fix asked Gustavo Olivieri himself, the WBO president, is Fundora still participating in purse bids with Zayas? Some reports are saying he is no longer participating in purse bids, just looking for accuracy before we report, to which Gustavo responded, "Hello, sir. The purse bid is still set for Friday. It will go forward as scheduled, and we shall see what happens. Stay tuned."
Veteran boxing scribe Abraham Gonzalez said, although this seems to be a formality, Sebastian Fundora has yet to formally communicate with the WBO with regards to vacating its title. Could this lead to a last-minute deal, or will Tszyu exercise his rematch clause to force Fundora's hand?
Tszyu's got a rematch clause.
So I would have thought any rematch clause in association with their initial meeting would have been voided by Tszyu's fight with Bakram Murtazaliev and his fight with Joey Spencer, that if there was a rematch clause, wouldn't it have expired by now?
Not that a rematch clause is necessary for them to do a fight, because it isn't. This is the fight everyone wants to see, Simpson Lukowicz said of Fundora versus Tszyu 2. It will be raining blood. Fundora outpointed Tszyu in a March 2024 upset over 12 bloody rounds. Fundora's decision to take on his former foe, the WBC number 6, who is unranked by the WBO, means that he will be stripped of the WBO title, leaving number 1 contender Xander Zayas to face number 2 rated Jorge Garcia Perez for the vacant title.
Purse bids for that vacant championship bout will go ahead on Friday in place of Fundora versus Zayas, with any promoter free to stake their claim to the contest. Simpson Boxing and Zayas' promoter Top Rank had previously failed to agree to terms for the WBO ordered bout.
Veteran boxing scribe Sean Zidale reacted to the news by saying, "Lame. Was looking forward to the Zayas fight big time. I thought PBC and Top Rank were serious about working together. Tszyu was set to face Thurman. All that build-up for what? Feels like a move just to avoid making the Zayas fight. A fight a lot of people in boxing believe Fundora wins."
Well, if only Simpson Lukowicz shared in that belief.
Put our cards on the table, gentlemen. Whoever backed away from the negotiation table likely did so for 2 reasons. 1, the purse bid is looming, and they are not confident that they can win the bid.
2,
they are not confident they can win the fight, irrespective of where it lands. Top Rank show, PBC show, they don't like their fighters' chances against the other.
So who backed away from the table?
Would seem that it's Team Fundora backing away and forfeiting the WBO title to get out of this situation. As I stated in a previous video, he could always drop the brown belt because he still has the green one. Not dissimilar from what Peter Quillen did so many years ago, dropping his WBO title to get out of the Matvey Korobov fight, the Matvey Korobov purse bid. It would seem that history is repeating itself with yet another PBC fighter.
I'm not against the Tim Tszyu fight, by the way.
I'm actually not against the rematch, even though I myself was excited about Zayas versus Fundora. I had Xander Zayas winning the fight. I'm okay with this rematch situation.
But if I could present a third scenario, say it's not the first, and say it's not the second, say this is a last-ditch effort to squeeze some more money out of Top Rank. I'm not saying this is the likeliest scenario, but the timing is impeccable. As the purse bid is looming, news of another fight miraculously pops up.
So that you can then go over to Top Rank and say, listen, if you still want us to do that Zayas fight, the price just went up because we have an alternative. We've got options. We can always drop the brown belt and you can have it.
A leverage play.
That is another way to look at this and what it could be.
A third scenario.
Entertaining all of them. I think it's more the former than the latter, though. I think that Team Fundora was never all the way committed to this fight. Not unless Top Rank was prepared to pay them a fortune.
It's the only way they would have did it. If Top Rank would have paid through the nose to bring Sebastian over.
Top Rank wanted to do the fight at or around the Puerto Rican Day Parade to play to the Puerto Rican crowd, as Xander Zayas is a Puerto Rican fighter.
Sebastian would have been required to concede home field advantage to the challenger where he is the champion.
Up until this point, we had no inkling and no hint that they may have been working on a Tim Tszyu rematch because as far as we knew, Tim Tszyu was en route to a Keith Thurman fight.
So I guess that fight is off.
If you've been following the channel the last few weeks or the last few months, you'll know that I wasn't fully convinced Thurman versus Tszyu would happen. It's one thing to travel to Australia for Brock Jarvis, but it's quite another to travel there for Tim Tszyu.
So I guess Keith Thurman is left without a dance partner?
Well, reigning IBF champion Bakram Murtazaliev has volunteered to face Keith in the absence of Tim. He quickly took to his social media and stated, "Let's do it at Keith Thurman Jr."
I do not expect this fight to happen.
For the entirety of Keith Thurman's career, he's been a picky eater, even in his prime. More so now that he's a quasi-retired fighter who's only had one fight in the last 3 years. I don't think for a second we're on the eve of a Thurman versus Murtazaliev fight. Keith, like everybody else, saw what Bakram did to Tim, and I do not expect Keith to roll the dice.
I get it.
It's not going to happen, but one fight that might is the Xander Zayas versus Jorge Garcia Perez fight.
Puerto Rico versus Mexico.
Jorge Garcia Perez, you may be familiar with that name. That's the same Jorge Garcia Perez that just won a split decision over then unbeaten Charles Conwell. That's also the same Jose Garcia Perez who has 4 recorded losses, one of which was the Carlos Ocampo. The same Carlos Ocampo that Spence knocked out, that Tim Tszyu knocked out. That Carlos Ocampo beat this Jorge Perez.
That being said, I think Xander wins. I think Xander beats him and becomes WBO champion.
Now you're thinking to yourself, but isn't it possible that over time, Jorge improved? He's coming off a string of victories, one of which is over unbeaten Charles Conwell. Well, Charles Conwell and Xander Zayas are very different fighters in terms of physical dimensions. Xander's a bigger, longer fighter than Charles in terms of styles. Xander is a boxer-puncher, whereas Charles is a pressure fighter.
And a good one.
But like most pressure fighters, there are not that many layers to Charles's game, whereas Xander is more the boxer, more the mover, and more the thinker, more ways of fighting a fight, on the front foot or on the go.
That's saying that just because Jorge beat Charles, that doesn't mean he beats Xander. I have Xander winning that fight.
Now over to this one, a Tim Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora rematch that I'm not against, though the Tim Tszyu people should tread carefully, putting their own plans on hold to return to America, where they haven't had much luck.
You spent all of last year in the United States losing. Are you sure you want to do that again? You know that a Sebastian Fundora rematch would actually be bigger in Australia than here in America. Neither of yous are a big name.
Not here. Sebastian Fundora just fought. He just returned to action against Cordell Booker, who he stopped. But if you looked out into the crowd, you would have noticed that there wasn't one. I don't know what the exact attendance numbers were, but I saw Sebastian's last fight, and I saw Timmy's last fight, and it looked a lot like there were more people at Tim's fight than Sebastian's.
So that you can come back here.
All right. I still think it's a winnable fight for Tim Tszyu because, let's be honest, the only reason Sebastian won their initial meeting was because of a freak accident, a sharp elbow to the top of Tim Tszyu's head. If not for that, Tim was well on his way to knocking out Sebastian, and Tim being the way that he is, I know he'd like another crack at the apple, and I know he would like to avenge that loss, right that wrong.
You know that if he wins the rematch, they could turn it into a trilogy.
But I suppose the real issue is that the PBC is not invested in the career of Tim Tszyu, and at this point in the juncture, they're only using him as an alternative to Zayas, so they can keep Sebastian out of that fight.
That would be the only reason they have so decided to revisit this rematch now.
The devil that you know, that Sebastian's already been in there with Tim. He fought him before. He beat him before. We don't have to go anywhere to do it. To anybody else's side of the street, we can stay right here.
Job Tim Tszyu if we have to.
Still has wide-eyed optimism that he can make it in America, make it to the big time in the United States, the way that his father did so many years ago, not realizing this is not your father's era of boxing.
Though this is still a winnable fight for Tim Tszyu. Look at how much damage he was able to do, and look at how long he lasted with his vision impaired, with all that blood streaming down his face, and he was still able to get in with right hand after right hand after right hand,
all with his vision impaired. Thus, if he tightens up in a rematch and fights a better version of that fight, doesn't run head first into Sebastian's elbow, he can win it.
And Sebastian's game plan?
Well, I really don't expect Sebastian's game plan to change from the first fight. In the first fight, you saw Sebastian try to use his height and his length for a change, where normally he likes to brawl mid-range to inside. With Timmy, he decided to box, and it worked.
But keep in mind that Timmy's vision was impaired, and even with that impaired vision, he was able to get in with hard punches. Hard punches with regularity.
Oh, sure, Sebastian fought the right fight, but it definitely helped that Timmy couldn't see.
Take that out of the equation, maybe the fight ends differently.
As stated, I'm not against this rematch. I wanted to see the Zayas fight, but I will take this in its place. I only hope that they don't have it in their head to build this as a pay-per-view, like they did the first one, that didn't sell anything.
Well, how else do you expect them to lure Timmy to America?
Well, the promise of big cash via the upside of the pay-per-view should have been dispelled by what the first fight did, or should I say, what the first fight didn't do, that I don't think the second is that hot a ticket.
I don't think it should be a pay-per-view, but when has that ever stopped the PBC?
If they're serious. At this time, we've yet to hear anything from the Tim Tszyu side of things to confirm that talks are ongoing to do a rematch over the summer months. Everything we've heard so far is from Simpson, who cannot be trusted.
So we'll see what happens, but it looks a lot like Fundora versus Zayas is a no-go.
Irrespective of whether they fight Tim Tszyu for a second time or not.
Elsewhere in the world of boxing, and men's light heavyweight news as it pertains to former WBC champion Alexander Gvozdyk.
Canelo Alvarez's call began a new chapter for the former champion. Alexander Gvozdyk was done with boxing until he received a call to spar Canelo Alvarez, and it reeled him back in. Gvozdyk knocked out Anthony Holloway in the third round on Saturday at the Front Wave Arena in Oceanside, California. The win marks his first since his second round knockout win over Isaac Rodriguez in 2023. After losing to Artur Beterbiev in 2019, Gvozdyk retired. He had an idea for a gambling business, which he described as an online casino, and even obtained a gambling license in his native Ukraine.
The main reason for my retirement was I thought I would start doing business, the 38-year-old Gvozdyk, 21-2 with 17 knockouts, told Boxing Scene. Then the war started, and all my plans were ruined, and I just had to do something. Amid the war, which began in February of 2022, Gvozdyk was watching an unfathomable occurrence. Then he received a chance phone call
Out of nowhere, Eli Sekbek called me and gave the phone to Canelo, Gvozdyk said. He was getting ready to fight Dmitry Bivol. I told him I wasn't in shape. Alvarez convinced Gvozdyk, who trains in Oxnard, California, with the words of not competing, but to learn and train. The following week after the call, he was in camp with the former undisputed super middleweight champion. In the beginning, it was very challenging, but then I started keeping up, Gvozdyk said. At the end of the camp, I started feeling pretty comfortable against him.
Gvozdyk was in shape and willing to give his professional career a second chance. He would fight 3 times in 2023 before ultimately getting an interim WBC light heavyweight title shot against Benavidez. Notably, Gvozdyk finished the fight strong, winning the late rounds.
I still felt like I had some gas in the tank, Gvozdyk said of the Benavidez fight. I was motivated because I understood this age. I am 37, now 38, and you have to put everything on the line. Otherwise, it might be your last chance. I tried, but I didn't win the fight.
Gvozdyk is now managed by 3 Point Management, the same management team behind Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez, who he sparred with ahead of Ramirez's fight with CBS in November. Gvozdyk noted that he was grateful to Alvarez and his team for bringing him back to boxing, helping him get to where he's at now. Gvozdyk is in the sport for one thing: one more chance at glory.
Obviously, for now, Bivol would be the best option because now he's undisputed, Gvozdyk said. Of course, all people are attracted by belts, and this is like a chance to put your name in history again. So obviously, Bivol is the best priority. But again, all those big names, even when you fight them, you don't even have to have a belt on the line because you are fighting an already legendary fighter, and which will put your name in history. I'm 38 years old. There isn't time to handpick fights. We get an opportunity, we will take it and fight, because it can be the last one.
When asked if he'd take on a contender like Anthony Yarde, Gvozdyk didn't hesitate.
And did you guys see Anthony Yarde on the undercard of Chris Eubank versus Conor Benn? Didn't look nothing special, nothing impressive, facing Lyndon Arthur for the 3rd time and struggling while he did it, to where a fight between him and Gvozdyk is actually winnable for Gvozdyk, even at 38. Have you ever thought about what happens should Dmitry Bivol win the trilogy if he beats Artur for a 2nd time?
You think Gvozdyk can beat Dmitry?
I think that Dmitry Bivol may so decide to move up. Maybe take on Zurdo Ramirez at cruiser. He mentioned that. What if Dmitry doesn't stay at light heavyweight after the Better Beef trilogy? If he wins, what if he moves up, the belts are redistributed, and Gvozdyk is there?
Think about the current landscape. Gvozdyk versus Buatsi, Gvozdyk versus Yarde, Gvozdyk versus Smith, Gvozdyk versus Morrell.
No, a lot of those fights are actually winnable fights for Oleksandr Gvozdyk, even at 38. That in the absence of a Dmitry Bivol and an Artur Beterbiev, there is not a dominant force on the horizon.
It's not wide-eyed optimism, ladies and gentlemen. It's an objective analysis of the current landscape at 175. If Artur should retire and Dmitry should move up,
Gvozdyk might be able to win a belt. I think he can, depending on who's opposite the ring.